This is going to be part 2 of my experience working at Capital One. I'm so glad that I'm putting this out on YouTube for anyone that's curious about what it's going to be like or what it's like working for a financial institution, specifically Capital One. I get nervous for a number of reasons filming this type of content, specifically work experience. What I share is going to be based on my experience and experiences from my peers from various management levels. If you're considering working for Capital One in your C-suite level, I'm sorry, I don't have a lot of insight for what your day-to-day is going to look like. But if you are a coordinator, a principal coordinator, an associate of any level, manager of any level, this video is for you. When I worked for Capital One and decided to quit my job in August of last year, I had zero backup plan. That is how bad working for this company was for me personally. And I know that the way that I feel is same for a lot of people that currently work at Capital One. One of the main reasons why I'm putting this video out on YouTube for people to view and watch and get the real experience of what it could be like for you working at Capital One is because Capital One really puts their associates through the ringer. Depending on what department you're in, it's going to be very miserable, very stressful. I cannot stress that enough. And Capital One is very strategic in the way that they operate as a business. So while the job itself may not be hard, whether you're a coordinator, an associate, a manager, while your core role may not be hard, when it comes to metrics and competencies, that's when your job is going to become very, very, very stressful and miserable. I'll say this, metrics and work politics go hand in hand. So Capital One is very strategic when operating as a business and managing their employees. That is what part 2 of this video is going to get into a little bit. Okay, so when you get a job at Capital One, whether you're a manager, a project manager, maybe you're gonna work in QA, maybe you're gonna work back office or casework, or maybe you're handling inbound or outbound phone calls. You're going to work with some sort of metric, pretty standard across various companies, no matter what job you're working. The reason why metrics are very important to speak about, specifically when it comes to working for Capital One, is your metrics are going to determine everything else as far as when it comes to ranking amongst your peers, when it comes to what scheduling you get or desire, when it comes to being hired internally, even when it comes down to raises. Your metrics or your competencies are going to determine everything else that goes on in the workplace for you. You're either going to have various stats that you have to uphold daily or monthly, or competencies. Competencies are going to be teamwork, judgment, lives the values, communication, ownership, problem solve, and I believe that's it. So your job is going to be based on those core competencies. I may be able to put a brief description of each competency so you can get a better understanding of how Capital One would use these metrics to rank you amongst your peers. Stats. And so, for example, If you're working back office, right? Typically, if you're working in a back office environment, you're working various cases. And on average, you have to complete 4 cases for every hour. While 4 cases an hour may not sound like a lot, your peers are trying to outdo you. And so that 4 cases an hour becomes 8 cases an hour or 10 cases an hour, to where you're trying to outdo your peers so that you can get the top raise. Or if you're taking inbound or outbound phone calls, myself, I was measured on both daily/monthly metrics or stats and competencies. So in my department, when it came to stats or metrics, we were managed based on your after call. So how long did it take you to take your next phone call? We were measured based on hold time, NPS, 24-hour callback rate, how many outbound calls did you make, how many times did you transfer to another department. Your QA scores are going to be looped into that. How many regulatory errors did you make? How many BI errors did you make? So I was being managed on that, on top of competencies. I would take these phone calls and I would have to not only figure out a solve for the customer, but I also have to make sure that I'm not placing the customer on hold for any longer than a minute or 2 minutes while I'm trying to read through various policies, read through the case, understand the customer situation, deal with system breakdowns. Madness. A lot of employees try to find loopholes and it just doesn't work out. So hold time, for example, a lot of agents would utilize silent hold times. The department kind of caught on to what we were doing, and that was counted against us eventually. And so you had to either talk BS or talk with the customer, kind of asking open-ended questions while you try and read through the case to try and prevent yourself from putting them on hold, affecting your ranking amongst your peers. Transfer rates, for example, how many times did we transfer to other departments? So a lot of times we had no choice but to transfer, whether there was a system issue that our IT or tech department had to handle or deal with, or let's say the customer passed away and their partner is calling in on their behalf. We had to transfer to that specific department. There were a number of reasons that we had to transfer the call that was completely out of our hands. And we were counted against that, unfortunately. And no matter how many surveys you fill out, no matter how many times you complain or vent to your management, it's 2020, nothing's going to change. It's just the way Capital One is choosing to operate at this time, unfortunately. So let's kind of discuss work politics and how metrics and work politics go hand in hand. So in the past, we were given bonuses. And so a lot of times you were just trying to outdo your peers so that you could get top bonus for that month or for that quarter, or for that year, depending on how your department operated. I believe in 2016, 17, Capital One did away with bonuses completely. On one hand, a lot of agents were crushed. They did not like that. And on the other hand, you had employees that life continued. So before, we were getting bonuses and we were getting yearly raises. And so now you're trying to outdo your peers, no longer for being incentivized for bonuses, but you're trying to outdo your peers for that year to get top raises. And because raises are merit-based, only a small percentage gets top raises at the end of the year. And so it goes a little something like this. At the end of the year, you have your talk with your manager and you pretty much summarize that previous year. So you're either going to be ranked exceptional, very strong, strong, inconsistent, action needed. And if you're ranked at inconsistent, not only do you not get a raise that year, but you also cannot post out of that department for that entire year. So you're pretty much, you have to work in that miserable department that you hate, that you're trying to get out of. You cannot post out. And so if you rank inconsistent, you don't get a raise. If you rank action needed, typically there's going to be some sort of disciplinary action that the company is going to take you through. Only a handful of your peers are going to get the strong rating, which I believe that's a 3% raise. A small percent is going to get very strong. It's nearly impossible to get exceptional. And I believe that comes with a 5 to 7% raise. You're doing all of this work. Workloads are extremely heavy just so you can hopefully get a decent raise at the end of the year. To kind of make life even worse for their employees, as if it wasn't bad enough. The year before I left Capital One made the decision to take where you ranked in the department, or take your metrics and determine what schedule you were given. So in the past, you could bid amongst your peers to determine or hopefully get the scheduling that you wanted. Capital One, they were getting rid of a lot of employees, or people were just quitting. I believe only 6% of my department, which were like the top 10 or top 5% of people in my department, were able to have the weekends off. Everyone else had to work a Saturday or Sunday, or both. It was mandatory to work on the weekend. I worked really hard for my schedule. I worked very hard to have my weekends off. And so when that was taken away from me, I was not happy. And so at this time, I'm struggling to uphold these metrics. My schedule was taken away from me, which in result of that, I also lost 10% of my income because of the hours that I worked. And it was becoming impossible for me to get promoted internally. And one of the main reasonings that I ended up quitting my job, if you were not the top 5, top 10% in your department, especially in my department, it was nearly impossible to get promoted. And I struggled personally to get promoted internally. And I did a really good job getting interviews. On average, I would get 3 to 4 interviews within a year. And each one, I would get really let down. I felt I did really strong in interviews. One of the last jobs that I applied for, I had a close connection, and my connect let me know that I essentially did not get the job because my manager did not give me the green light to for the promotion. And there was nothing I could do. I just accepted the cards that were dealt to me in that situation, and it hurt. And I also just realized life is way too short to let any company overwork me, not appreciate all that I bring to an organization. I was lucky enough to find a new job within 3.5 months of me quitting Capital One. So I'm in a much better place, and I've learned so much, and I hope that I can put my story out there to help others. If I could give one helpful tip for anyone that wants to work at Capital One, Capital One does a really good job when it comes to employee matching. So Capital One will match up to 6% of whatever you put into your investments. If I could give one advice, it would be max out the 6%. It's free money, and over time, your investments are going to explode. At first, it seems slow and it is gradual, but over time, you're going to thank yourself. And it's the main reason that I was able to up and quit my job, because I was proactive, because I made good investments. If I can help someone else out there just to prepare them for what you may experience, invest your money wisely, take full advantage of the free money that Capital One matches when it comes to investing. It's not hard, and you're going to thank yourself in the long run. In my personal opinion, Capital One has a layoff culture. For the vast majority of employees, I would not think long term when it comes to working for Capital One. I would think short term and just make sure that you're being due diligent, make sure that you're increasing your skills, make sure you're networking with people outside of work, so that if that time comes, whether you get laid off or whether your job is increasingly stressful, you have options and you prepare yourself financially so that you can try and uphold your living standards while you search for what's next for you. That's all for this video.